$800 a month. That's how much I'm currently paying for my Claude subscription. That's 4 max accounts every month. And if you're paying for any AI subscription, you probably had the same thoughts as me. Is there a better and cheaper alternative? So I priced up the local AI setups you'd need if you're a power user, if you're a small business, if you're a whole company. So by the end of this video, you'll know what each one costs, how it performs against an AI subscription, and whether to set up your own local AI and get rid of that subscription. Now, most of my business runs this stuff every day, and when I went to look into this, the ground has definitely moved. The hardware I would have recommended just 2 months ago, Apple's already discontinued it. So we'll get to that. First, let's look at the cheapest setup that still works well. Nathan from the future here. Not only has the hardware availability changed since writing the script, the cost has changed dramatically since editing the last video. Over the last 12 months, we've seen the prices of graphics card, RAM, and hard drives change by 30 to 100%. The individual pieces of hardware I'm going to be discussing have gone up by $1,500 since my initial recording. We've updated the math for you, but this proves an important point. Like in real estate, with AI technology, you need to take your time and hurry up at the same time. So don't rush out and buy something you don't need because of a scarcity panic. That said, watch this video, and if local AI makes sense to you, move on it before the price and availability make the decision for you. So the first setup is for one user. So you can think like a solo coder, a power user, someone who wants to run AI on their own desk. Now, the best machine to buy is a Mac Studio with the M3 Ultra chip and 96 gigabytes of unified memory. Base configuration, you're looking at about $5,300. So that's the entry point for running serious local AI on a single box. Now, if you've already got a desktop PC and you'd rather upgrade that, the alternative is an RTX 5090. So the recommended retail price on that is around $2,000. Current pricing right now is between $4,200 and $5,500. More for the premium overclocked models. And you have to build the rest of the PC around it. So you're looking at between $7,500 and $10,500, depending on whether you're going for a gaming build or a proper workstation. The Mac is the silent, low power, and works the moment you plug it in. And then you've got the PC, so faster but louder, drinks more power, and takes quite a bit of setup to get it working properly. So pick based on what you already own and how much hassle you're willing to deal with. So that's the hardware stuff. Now the question for this power user, single user, what do you actually run on it? Now, as of recording, the best open weight model, you're looking at something like the Qwen 3.6. That's the 27 billion parameter version released in late April this year. Not a mixture of experts model. All 27 billion parameters are active on every token, and it fits comfortably on that 96 gigabyte Mac Studio at decent quality. This space moves fast though, of course. By the time you watch this, there may be something newer, better, and more powerful. So in order to help you with that, I've written an article on how to find what's the best and what's the updated models at the time, where the leaderboards are, what you can trust, what licenses mean, and how to run those checks yourself. So check out the link in the description if you want the very latest on what model that you want to get. On SWE-Bench Verified, the standard real-world coding benchmark, Qwen 3.6 scores 77.2%. Now, Claude Opus 4.7, per Anthropic's own announcement, sits at 64.4%. On the harder SWE-Bench Pro variant, Qwen 53.5%, Opus 47.8%. On vendor benchmarks, Qwen actually beats Opus on both. So why am I still saying keep Claude for the hard 20% of your work? Because vendor benchmarks aren't real world work. So anyone running both will tell you Opus handles multi-file architectural reasoning, long context refactors, and ambitious specs noticeably better. But the capability gap is definitely closing. So run local for that routine stuff and run one Claude subscription for the hard stuff that you need to do. And it can then change the level of subscription that you need to have from the more expensive to the cheaper one. So for me, it would take it down from $800, maybe down to say half that. If you're watching this video, then like and subscribe, because I've got some really important videos on AI coming up that you won't want to miss. So one Claude Max, I think it's called a times 20 at the moment account, that's what, like $200 a month. You've got to compare that against a $5,300 Mac Studio. You're going to get the payback in about 27 months. 4 Max accounts like me a month, that's going to be 6.5 months. And if you're only on a Claude Pro at $20 a month, the Mac doesn't pay for itself for over 2 decades. So obviously you just shouldn't bother there. So who's this tier actually for? Well, build this if you want personal document search across your own notes, a voice assistant that doesn't phone home, NDA bound client work where the code can't leave your machine, routine coding as part of a hybrid pattern where you're doing the hard stuff on the frontier models in the cloud, or running Chinese open weight models without the data going through their API. Now that's the personal answer. But what if it's not just you? What if it's a team, or you want to know how to build this for a real business? So we're thinking here, say 5 to 50 people. An office, the personal tier box doesn't scale to a team. It's a single point of failure. So at this tier, the answer is 2 boxes. You can get 2 Mac Studios with the M3 Ultra chip. And the story gets a little bit uncomfortable from here, because the version of this video I planned to record 2 months ago would have recommended a different machine. A couple of months back, Apple quietly pulled the 512 gigabyte Mac Studio option. Global DRM shortage is the problem. Then in early May, they pulled the 256 gigabyte option entirely. As of right now, the maximum memory you can buy in a Mac Studio is 96 gigabytes. So that's a quarter of what was available just a few months ago. 2 of those with the M3 Ultra chip and full 96 gigabyte each runs you at about $10,600 for the pair. So the small team setup got cheaper than I expected. There's also a capability shift that most build videos haven't caught up to yet. In December, Apple shipped macOS 26.2. And if you open the release notes, there's a section entitled RDMA Over Thunderbolt. And here's the quote: "This enables low latency communication between Thunderbolt 5 hosts for use cases including distributed AI inference using MLX." So in English, you can split a model across the 2 Mac Studios connected by that Thunderbolt 5 cable, and they behave more like one bigger machine than 2 separate ones. So we're talking about DeepSeek V4 Flash. That fits across 2 96 gigabyte Macs at its native FP4, FP8 precision. Hundreds of billions of parameters running on hardware in your office. That was data center only just last year. And if you want to go bigger, the largest open weight frontier models like DeepSeek V3 or Kimi K2 or whatever it happens to be, you're looking at upgrading and you can chain them over that Thunderbolt 5. If your business needs more frontier close class reasoning, the same two boxes can do it. You'll need a Thunderbolt 5 cable and a piece of software called EXO. Llama doesn't currently support this transport yet, but maybe it will do soon. Now, if you want raw speed instead of Apple's silent path, there's the Nvidia alternative, 2 RTX 5090s in a workstation. And that's $13,000 to $18,000 all in for a DIY build. Faster per token than the Macs, better suited for batch processing, overnight invoice runs, document analysis at volume. So the rule of thumb, the Mac path wins for production, customer-facing work. The PC path wins for raw, throughput, and fine-tuning. So that's the hardware at this level. Now let's talk about the model. So as of recording, the best commercial use option is DeepSeek V4 Flash, as mentioned, released in late April this year. MIT license, commercial use is permitted, no strings attached. Mixture of experts model, 284 billion parameters total, only 13 billion active per token. So efficient enough to run on the team tier hardware. Same caveat as before though, use my article in the description to work out what's the best model right now when you watch this. But as of now, V4 Flash scores 76% on SWE-Bench Verified at maximum reasoning effort. At default settings, it's around 74%. Either way, the Frontier class benchmark numbers on a model that's fully open weight, fully commercially usable, and runs on your own hardware. Same caveat I gave for the Qwen model, benchmarks aren't real world performance. Another caveat, V4 can hallucinate confidently. Fine for code, document processing, retrieval, wash out on medical or legal drafting where calibrated uncertainty matters. And quick aside before section 3, the hardware and model are half the picture. The other half is what you actually run on top of it. Coding agents, automation platforms, security tools. I put together a free comparison, 260 of them across 6 categories with the licensing and the prices. Links in the description. That's the AI and automation tool landscape. Right, let's get back at it. So who's this second tier for? Well, yes, build this if your business needs an internal company knowledge base. Let your team search across your documents in plain English instead of grep. A customer support chatbot trained on your own product or ticket history would work well here. Document and invoice processing, where you want to extract amounts, flag anomalies, do first pass contract review. Also things like sales call analysis, patterns, sentiment, lead scoring. For all of that, 90% of Opus quality is more than enough. These use cases don't need frontier reasoning. Don't build this if you've got fewer than 5 employees. Anthropic team is at about $25 a seat, is cheaper and simpler. Let's do the maths. So if you've got 2 Mac Studios with the M3 Ultra and the 96 gigabytes each, we're talking about $10,500 for the pair. So the workloads at this tier, we're talking RAG, support, chatbot, document processing. These run on API tokens, not per seat plans generally. So for a 30-person business, running all 3 on Claude Sonnet or a mid-tier open AI model, realistic spend lands at maybe $1,000 a month, say. The hardware pays back in under 11 months. After that, you're saving about 12 grand a year every year, assuming the prices stay stable. Now, high volume deployments, more queries, heavier, customer chatbot traffic is higher, dev teams using Claude code on top can push API spend towards maybe $2,000 plus subscriptions, $3,000 a month. Payback can drop down to about 3.5 months. Hardware savings can be like 30 grand a year. But if your API spend is under $500 a month, the math flips. The hardware never pays back at that volume. So just stay on the API. And if you're trying to use this as the AI behind production code review for a senior dev team, same problem. We hit at the personal tier, just bigger. Senior dev time is too expensive to lose on a weaker model. So keep paying for the Frontier model or Claude code seats for those code reviews, and use this for the lighter work or everything else. And there's one more setup above this, and that's the hardware that genuinely competes with Claude and ChatGPT. Not a buying decision most of us are making, but it matters that you know it exists, so I'll cover it quickly. I'm sure there's some of you out there where this counts for you. So the recommended setup at the whole company end is a single rack of around 8 Nvidia H200 GPUs. That's what they use if you're interested in what big firms do. So verified pricing across multiple vendors lands anywhere from $200,000 to $500,000 plus power, plus cooling, plus a team to actually run it. An 8 H200 rack handles hundreds of consecutive users. It's the same hardware class powering ChatGPT and Claude, just one rack instead of thousands. If your reaction is, "Are you mad?" then obviously this isn't for you, then you should stay with cloud. If your reaction is, "Actually, that's cheaper than our annual API spend at our headcount," then welcome, this bit's for you. One correction worth dropping in though, you'll see marketing claims that the H200 is 3 or 4 times faster than the H100 generation. It isn't. Nvidia's own Tensor RT LLM benchmarks land it at about 1.9 times. On this hardware, you'd run DeepSeek V4 Pro or something like that at its native mixed FP4 and FP8 precision. No further quantization tax on top. 1.6 trillion parameters. With this model, you're looking at 80.6% on SWE-Bench Verified at max reasoning effort, matching Gemini 3.1 Pro. Same caveat, of course, benchmark numbers, not real world, but this is the open weight ceiling running on hardware that you actually own. But before anyone here justifies writing that check, there's a myth in this space that needs killing. People will tell you that regulated industries must self-host their AI because of things like HIPAA, FISMA, and so on. But that can be often overstated. Anthropic, for example, offers HIPAA-ready Claude through signed business associate agreements, direct via the API and enterprise tier. You've got AWS Bedrock and Google Cloud's Vertex AI. You can use those. You've got the US Department of Veterans Affairs. The VA uses generative AI in production and has authorized Microsoft Azure government at FedRAMP High in the cloud with proper controls. If the VA can run clinical generative AI in the cloud environment, your mid-sized hospital probably can too. Most clinical decisions support EHR analysis, patient communication, drafting, contract review, regulated financial work. All of that can run on cloud APIs with the right BAA in place. The actual buyer list for the whole company setup is much narrower than people might think. Classified networks maybe, SIPR, JWICS, ITAR restricted workloads, FISMA high systems, pharma drug discovery, where the IP is a board level risk, maybe investment bank proprietary trading models, and of course things like EU sovereignty cases would fit here, or pure cost economics. You're already spending so much on per seat AI or API costs that the hardware mass is obvious. And on the mass, of course, 400 grand of hardware plus about 2,500 a month for power and colo. Add an ML ops engineer to actually run it and call it another 7 grand a month all in. Total cost over 3 years, you might be looking at $742,000. If your company is spending 80 to 100 grand a month on enterprise API tokens, typical for serious production AI across thousands of employees, the hardware pays back in 5 to 6 months. That could be 3 years savings, around $2.5 million. So the actual answer to should I build my own AI, it comes down to what you actually do with AI, not how much you can spend. Now you know what to buy, what it costs, and whether it's worth it for what you actually do. You just heard me recommend Chinese open weight models, Qwen, DeepSeek. The obvious question is whether that's actually safe for your use case. Open weights running on your own hardware should sidestep the data routing problem, but it's more nuanced than that. So I've broken it down properly in this next video.